Picture this! You're scrolling through social media, and suddenly, Tom Brady drops a bombshell that has nothing to do with football. The 7-time Super Bowl champion casually reveals he's cloned his beloved dog. Not metaphorically, not as some cute nickname for a look-alike puppy, actually clone, like Dolly the Sheep clone, like Jurassic Park clone. And the internet absolutely loses its mind. Some people are heartbroken at the thought of their own aging pets. Others are horrified at the concept of playing God. And a surprising number are simply Googling, how much does it cost to clone my own dog? The answer? Somewhere between $50,000 and $85,000, which explains why your neighbor hasn't cloned Fluffy yet. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about a wealthy quarterback spending his money on an unusual luxury. This is about a technology that's rapidly moving from science fiction into reality. A technology that's becoming more standardized, more accessible, and more mainstream with every passing year. I'll be honest with you, as a long-suffering New York Jets fan, I spent decades absolutely hating to have to watch Tom Brady dismantle my team twice a year with surgical precision. But you had to admire the guy's success and longevity. The man played until he was 45 years old at the highest level. And now he's applying that same approach to his relationships, refusing to let go, finding ways to extend what he values, maintaining continuity even when nature says it's time to move on. That's very on brand for Tom Brady actually. But while we're talking about cloning Brady's dog, we should probably ask ourselves, where does this lead? Because the same technology that's bringing back Bella the Terrier is being used by companies like Colossal Biosciences to resurrect dire wolves. And if we can do it for dogs and wolves, well, the logical endpoint of human cloning and enhancements gets uncomfortable pretty quickly, doesn't it? Welcome to Apprentice.io's Industry Insights. I'm Frank Maggiore, and today we're diving into the fascinating, emotionally complex, and ethically murky world of pet cloning and examining what this technology reveals about human nature, about our relationship with mortality, and about a future that's arriving faster than most of us realize. Today, we're exploring how families are using cloning as part of their grief process, how the manufacturing of life itself is becoming standardized and scalable, and how the same techniques might soon be creating designer pets, resurrecting extinct species, and eventually forcing us to confront whether we should be engineering ourselves. My sister also says that she would totally clone her corgi Frankie. Yes, I know, me and the dog have the same name. She's hoping to be first in line for Loyal's Canine Life Extension program, and eventually clone her dog if he can live long enough and the costs come down enough. I said she'd be like the Queen of England, walking around her house surrounded by multiple corgi clones of Frankie following her wherever she goes. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is pet cloning and what is it not? When someone clones their dog, they're not creating a backup copy that can be restored like a computer file. They're not getting their exact dog back with all the same memories, quirks, and personality traits. What they're getting is something more akin to an identical twin of their original pet, born years later, with its own unique experiences and development. The current market leader in this space is ViaGen Pets, a Texas-based company that's been cloning dogs, cats, and horses since 2015. They produce hundreds of cloned pets, and their client list ranges from celebrities to everyday pet owners who saved up for years to afford the service. And who are these people choosing to clone their pets? The stereotypical answer might be eccentric millionaires with too much money and not enough sense. But the reality is far more nuanced and, frankly, more heartbreaking. Many clients are people facing the impending loss of a pet that's been with them through major life transitions, a divorce, the death of a parent, recovery from an illness, or simply years of companionship during isolation. These aren't people trying to cheat death out of vanity. They're people trying to maintain a connection to something that brought them comfort during their darkest times. Some families are actually planning ahead. They're taking tissue samples from their healthy pets now, creating what amounts to a genetic insurance policy. If Buddy lives another 10 years and dies naturally, great. But if something unexpected happens, they have the option to continue the genetic line. It's a fascinating intersection of preparation and hope, pragmatism and emotion. From a psychological perspective, this tells us something profound about human nature in the 21st century. We live in an age where we have unprecedented control over many aspects of our lives. We can control our entertainment, our environment, our social interactions, our appearance, but we can't control loss. We can't control aging. We can't control death itself. Pet cloning represents an attempt to extend that sphere of control just a little bit further. It's saying, I know I can't stop my dog from dying, but maybe I don't have to lose everything. Maybe I can keep this one connection intact. As we age, as our friends move away, as family members pass on, as the world changes around us, the desire to maintain continuity becomes even stronger. A clone pet represents stability in an unstable world. It's genetic loyalty in a world where everything else feels temporary. Now, compare this to the traditional grief process. Humans have always sought ways to memorialize their loved ones. Photographs, grave sites, keepsakes, rituals. In many ways, cloning is just the most technologically advanced version of I'm not ready to let go yet. The difference is that instead of a photo album, you get a living, breathing animal that shares DNA with the one that you lost. Is it healthy? Is it helpful? That's a question psychologists are still working through. But what's undeniable is that it's happening, and it's happening more frequently as the costs come down and the technology becomes more accessible. All right, let's get into the science. How do you actually clone a dog? And why is it so expensive and complicated? The process is called somatic cell nuclear transfer, or SCNT, and it's the same basic technique that produced Dolly the sheep back in 1996. But don't let that same basic technique language fool you. This is extraordinarily complex, finicky, and failure-prone biology. Here's how it works. First, you need a tissue sample from the dog you want to clone. This is typically taken through a small skin biopsy, and ideally, it's done while the dog is still alive or very soon after its death. These cells are then cultured in a laboratory, creating a stable cell line that can be stored for years or even decades. When you're ready to proceed with the cloning, scientists take one of these cultured cells and remove the nucleus, the part containing all the genetic information. Then, they take an egg cell from a donor dog and remove its nucleus. They're essentially creating an empty genetic vessel. Next comes the tricky part. They insert the nucleus from your dog cell into the empty egg cell. Through a combination of chemical triggers and electrical pulses, they coax this reconstructed egg into behaving like a newly fertilized embryo. If it works, and this is a big if, the egg begins dividing and developing as if it was naturally conceived. These developing embryos are then implanted into a surrogate mother dog. She carries the pregnancy to term, and if everything goes right, she gives birth to puppies that are genetic clones of the original dog. Now, here's the critical thing to understand. The puppy is not identical to your original dog. It's genetically identical, yes, but genetics is only part of the equation. Epigenetics, how genes are expressed based on environmental factors, plays a huge role. The clone might have different coat patterns, different health outcomes, and definitely different personality traits. Think of it like identical twins separated at birth and raised in different families. Same DNA, different people. Your clone dog will share the genetic blueprint of your original pet, but it's developing in a different womb, being raised in a different environment, and having entirely different experiences. The memories, learned behaviors, and quirks that made your original dog special, those don't transfer. From a manufacturing perspective, this is a pipeline process with multiple quality control checkpoints and significant failure rates at each stage. Out of every 100 embryos created, maybe 20 will develop properly. Out of those 20 implanted embryos, maybe 5 will result in successful pregnancies. And out of those pregnancies, maybe 2 or 3 will produce viable puppies. That's why it costs so much. You're not paying for one successful clone. You're paying for all the attempts, all the failures, all the surrogate care, and all the specialized expertise required to navigate this incredibly delicate biological process. Their technology has improved significantly since the early days. Success rates are higher, the puppies are healthier, the process is more predictable. But it's far from routine, and it's still more art than science in many ways. So why does pet cloning matter beyond giving wealthy pet owners a genetic copy of Fido? because this technology is the foundation for some genuinely transformative and potentially troubling applications. First, let's talk about accessibility. Right now, at $50,000 to $85,000 per clone, this is a luxury service. But costs are dropping as the process becomes more standardized, as more companies enter the market, and as success rates improve. We're looking at a future where pet cloning could be priced similarly to a purebred puppy from a premium breeder, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 within the next decade. At that price point, this stops being a curiosity and becomes a legitimate option for millions of pet owners. The manufacturing process is becoming standardized with quality control metrics, success rate tracking, and efficiency improvements. It's transitioning from experimental biology to industrial biotech. And that's where things get really interesting and complicated. Take Colossal Biosciences, for example. This company has made headlines with its ambitious de-extinction projects, including bringing back the woolly mammoth and the Tasmanian tiger. One of their recent projects, the dire wolf. Now, here's where we need to be precise about what's actually happening. Colossal isn't creating actual dire wolves, the species that went extinct about 10,000 years ago. What they're doing is using modern wolf DNA and CRISPR gene editing to create animals that have traits we think dire wolves had based on fossil evidence. It's genetic phenotyping, an educated guess about what those traits were and how to create them. And Colossal has been criticized, fairly, for sometimes overselling this distinction. Headlines like, "Scientists bring back dire wolves," are misleading. What they're really doing is creating a modern animal that looks and behaves like what we think dire wolves look and behave like. It's more Jurassic Park than pure de-extinction. And if you remember those movies, the dinosaurs weren't exact recreations either. And they needed to keep updating them for each new movie based on the latest science describing what the dinosaurs actually look like. But here's why this matters. The same techniques being used for pet cloning and de-extinction are the foundation for genetic engineering. And that opens doors that we might not be ready to walk through yet. Imagine a future where you don't just clone your dog, you clone your dog with improvements. Want a golden retriever that doesn't shed? That could be engineered. Want a pug without all the respiratory problems that plague the breed? That's theoretically possible. Want a dog that lives 20 years instead of 12? We're working on that. This is the slippery slope in action. We can pretty easily go from a very emotional, "I want my dog back," to "I want my dog back, but better," to "I want to design my ideal dog from scratch in just a few logical steps." And then we ask the most uncomfortable question: if we can do this for dogs, then why not humans? The technical barriers between cloning a dog and cloning a human aren't that significant. The ethical, legal, and social barriers are enormous, but the biology and technological techniques are similar. As of now, we're just not willing to deal with the same rates of failure in humans that we are with our canine companions. And the techniques that we're perfecting on pets, improving success rates, reducing complications, standardizing the process, are directly applicable to human cloning. More immediately realistic than human cloning is human genetic enhancement, using CRISPR and related technologies to eliminate genetic diseases, to enhance intelligence, to improve physical capabilities, to extend lifespan. We're not there yet, but we're closer than most people realize. And every cloned dog, every de-extinct wolf, every optimized embryo brings us one step closer to having to make some very difficult decisions about what we should do with this technology. Now, you might be wondering, what does manufacturing execution system software have to do with cloning dogs? The answer is everything, if you want to do it safely, efficiently, and at scale. Let's think about what a pet cloning operation actually involves from a manufacturing perspective. You have biological samples from potentially hundreds of clients. You have cell lines being cultured and stored. You have embryos being created and tracked. You have surrogate dogs being managed through pregnancy. You have veterinary care at multiple stages. And you have clients who are enormously emotionally invested in a very specific outcome. This is a complex, multi-stage manufacturing process with extremely high stakes. Mix up a client sample, and you're not just making a production error, you're destroying someone's last connection to a beloved pet. Fail to properly document your quality control, and you could face regulatory consequences as this industry becomes more formalized. This is exactly where cloud-based manufacturing execution systems excel. First and most critical, chain of identity. In pharmaceutical manufacturing, we use chain of identity protocols to track biological materials from collection through processing to final product. For autologous cell therapies, treatments made from a patient's own cells, this is absolutely essential. You cannot afford to mix up patient samples. The exact same principle applies to pet cloning. From the moment that tissue biopsy is taken from Buddy the Golden Retriever, that sample needs to be tracked with unique identifiers, documented at every processing step, and verified before any procedure. Barcode scanning, digital documentation, and automatic verification steps prevent mix-ups that would be devastating. Second, traceability requirements. As pet cloning becomes more common, regulatory frameworks will emerge. We're already seeing this in other areas of animal biotechnology. Being able to trace every step of the process, which technician handled the sample, what conditions it was stored under, which surrogate mother carried the embryo, what veterinary care was provided, protects both the company and the client. Third, quality control in a high failure rate process. Remember, cloning has success rates that would be unacceptable in most manufacturing. But if you're tracking metrics across hundreds of attempts, you can identify patterns. Maybe certain cell lines have better success rates. Maybe specific technicians have better embryo development outcomes. Maybe temperature variations in storage affect viability. A cloud-based manufacturing execution system captures all this data automatically, analyzes trends, and provides actionable insights for process improvement. Over time, this data-driven approach raises success rates and reduces costs, making the technology more accessible. Fourth, batch management for multiple projects. A pet cloning facility isn't working on one dog at a time. They're managing dozens of active cases simultaneously, each at different stages of the process. Some are in cell culture, some are in embryo development, some are implanted in surrogates, some are monitoring pregnancies. Coordinating all this requires sophisticated scheduling, resource allocation, and progress tracking. Manufacturing execution systems are built for exactly this kind of complex, multi-stage workflow management. Fifth, documentation for an emotionally charged service. Pet cloning clients aren't just buying a product, they're buying a peace of mind during a difficult time. Providing them with detailed documentation of the entire process, photo updates, genetic verification, and health records builds trust and manages expectations. As this industry scales from hundreds of clones per year to potentially thousands or tens of thousands, these manufacturing execution capabilities become essential. You can't run a large-scale cloning operation with clipboards and spreadsheets. You need integrated, automated, validated systems that ensure quality and consistency. And here's the bigger picture. The systems we're implementing for pet cloning today are the same systems that will be needed for more advanced applications tomorrow. If we move toward de-extinction programs, designer animals, or eventually human genetic therapies, the manufacturing infrastructure needs to be bulletproof. Cloud-based manufacturing execution systems provide that foundation. Scalable, flexible, and built for the most demanding regulated environments in the world. So, where is this technology headed? Let's start with the near-term future and work our way towards the possibilities that sound like science fiction, but are becoming increasingly plausible. In the near term, for the next 5 years, the most significant change will be the democratization of the process. As costs fall below $20,000 and eventually below $10,000, pet cloning moves from only the wealthy to expensive but possible for middle-class pet owners. We'll see success rates continue to improve with healthier clones and fewer complications. We're also seeing the emergence of genetic banking services, companies that will take and store tissue samples from your pet for a few $100s, giving you the option to choose to clone later if you want. It's like fertility preservation, but for your golden retriever. The technology is also being refined for more species. Cats are already being cloned successfully. Horses have been cloned for years, particularly valuable racing and breeding stock. Exotic species for conservation purposes are being explored. The techniques are becoming more universal and more robust. For Colossal Biosciences and similar companies, the next few years will show us how close they can get to true de-extinction. Their direwolf program is progressing, using modern gray wolves as a base and editing the genetic traits from extinct direwolf DNA extracted from fossils. They're targeting a first generation of proxy dire wolves within the next few years. But here's the thing, these still won't be true dire wolves. They'll be genetically modified gray wolves that have some dire wolf phenotypic characteristics. It's important not to oversell this as bringing back extinct species when what we're really doing is creating new animals inspired by extinct ones. In the midterm, for the next 5 to 15 years, this is where things get ethically complex. We're looking at the emergence of designer pets with engineered traits. Want a dog that's hypoallergenic? We can identify and modify the genes responsible for producing allergens. Want a breed that lives longer? We're studying the genetics of longevity in different species and can potentially extend canine lifespan significantly. Want to eliminate genetic diseases that plague certain purebred lines? That's achievable with current technology. The question isn't, can we do this? It's, should we do this? And more importantly, who decides what traits are desirable and which ones are not? There's a genuine argument for eliminating genetic diseases. Certain dog breeds have been damaged by selective breeding practices that prioritize appearance over health. Using genetic engineering to fix these problems could reduce suffering. That seems ethically justifiable. You can just picture a pug's breathing issues every time they go for a run, or severe hip dysplasia issues in German Shepherds and Rottweilers. But what about enhancing traits for human preference? Making dogs more obedient, more energetic, more placid. At what point does genetic engineering become a form of exploitation, creating animals that are optimized for our own desires rather than their own well-being? And then comes the elephant in the room, humans. The technical capability to clone humans already exists. We've cloned monkeys, our closest evolutionary relatives. The process would work for humans as well. What stops us isn't technical capabilities, it's ethics, laws, and social consensus. Where do we draw the line on what's socially acceptable? How is it that a man in the military can die in combat, have sperm extracted from his body, a process known as posthumous sperm removal or PSR, and is used to create a child, is viewed as almost a heroic action by a wife? But a child of a school shooting, tragic accident, or other event that cuts their life painfully short would be viewed as creepy or ethically unacceptable for grieving parents. It is interesting where that line of social acceptability is currently being drawn, and if widespread cloning of dogs begins to remove some of those social barriers of resistance. But as we normalize genetic engineering in animals, and as we work out the safety issues, as we build the manufacturing infrastructure, we're also building the pathway to human applications. More likely than human cloning, and possibly arriving sooner, is human genetic enhancement, using CRISPR and related technologies to eliminate genetic diseases from embryos. This is already happening in limited experimental context. China made headlines a few years ago where the first gene-edited babies created to be resistant to HIV infection. That experiment was widely condemned, but it proved the technical feasibility. And as the technology becomes safer and more reliable, the arguments for using it become more compelling. If you could guarantee your child wouldn't inherit your family's history of heart disease, wouldn't you? If you could eliminate the gene variant that puts them at higher risk for Alzheimer's, wouldn't you do that? If you could improve their immune system, extend their expected lifespan, enhance their cognitive potential, where do you draw the line? In the far future, beyond the next 15 years, we're potentially looking at a world where genetic enhancement is common, where designing certain traits and offspring is accepted practice, where the line between therapy and enhancement has blurred beyond recognition. We're looking at a world where extinct species exist in new forms, where conservation biology has merged with genetic engineering, where we're actively managing the genetics of ecosystems. And we're looking at profound philosophical questions about identity, about what it means to be human, about the nature of parenting and choice and control. If you have a clone of your beloved dog, is it the same dog? If we create a dire wolf proxy from modified gray wolf DNA, is it a dire wolf? If we enhance human embryos to eliminate disease risk, are we engaged in medicine or eugenics? These aren't abstract philosophical exercises. These are questions we're going to have to answer as a society in the not too distant future. And every clone pet, every de-extinction project, every genetic enhancement experiment is bringing us closer to decision points we're wholly not prepared for. So let's bring this back to where we started. Tom Brady and his cloned dog. What began as a celebrity curiosity has led us through the science of cloning, the psychology of grief and control. the standardization of life manufacturing, the resurrection of extinct species, the prospect of designer pets, and ultimately to questions about human genetic engineering that we can't avoid much longer. The technology that allows Brady to maintain a genetic connection to his beloved pet is the same technology that could eliminate genetic diseases, resurrect extinct species, and fundamentally alter what it means to be human. That's not hyperbole, that's the logical trajectory of the science. And at the heart of all this technology is something profoundly human, our unwillingness to accept loss, our desire for continuity, our need to maintain connections to the things and beings that we love, our drive to control what we can in a chaotic world. And honestly, there's something beautiful about that. The fact that we love our pets so much that we'd spend enormous sums of money to preserve a genetic link to them speaks well of our capacity for attachment and loyalty. The fact that we want to bring back extinct species shows we recognize and regret the damage we've done to the natural world. But there's also something troubling in our unwillingness to accept limits, in our assumption that because we can do something, we should, in our tendency to rush forward with technology while leaving the ethical frameworks far behind. So here's the hope. As this technology advances, and it will advance because the potential benefits are too significant to ignore, we approach it thoughtfully. We ask the hard questions. We establish ethical guardrails. In the immortal words of Ian Malcolm from the first Jurassic Park movie, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Which is a statement that was never uttered by any tech bros, ever. So, we need to consider how we perform these actions responsibly. The manufacturing infrastructure that we build for pet cloning and genetic engineering needs to include not just quality control and traceability, but ethical oversight and social responsibility. The same manufacturing execution systems tracking biological samples should be designed with privacy protections, consent management, and appropriate limitations built in from the start. We need to engage in these conversations now while the technology is still emerging, rather than later when it's already entrenched and the consequences are irreversible. To the scientists and companies working in this space, your technical achievements are remarkable, but please don't oversell them. Be honest about what you can and can't do. Be transparent about the limitations and uncertainties. The public trust that you're building now will determine whether society embraces or rejects these technologies in the near future. To the regulators and policymakers, don't wait for a crisis to establish frameworks. Start working on the new guidelines now. Bring together ethicists, scientists, manufacturers, and the public to develop consensus on appropriate applications and necessary restrictions. And to everyone else, pay attention. This isn't someone else's problem to solve. These technologies will affect all of us. They'll change how we think about pets, about conservation, about medicine, about what it means to be human. You get a voice in how this all unfolds, but that voice carries more weight if you're informed and engaged. Whether it's cloning a beloved pet, resurrecting an extinct wolf, or manufacturing life-saving therapies, the question isn't just can we, it's should we, and how do we do it responsibly. Tom Brady might have just wanted to keep his dog around a little longer in genetic form, but he's inadvertently become part of a much larger conversation about humanity's relationship with life, death, and the power to reshape both. As we move forward into this brave new world of genetic engineering and life manufacturing, let's do it with our eyes open, our ethics intact, and our humanity fully engaged. Because the choices we make in the next few years will echo for generations, quite literally. The future is being manufactured right now, so let's make sure we're manufacturing the right one for the world that we all want to live in. In an industry where precision and compliance are paramount, Apprentice's Tempo platform offers a cutting-edge manufacturing execution system solution. It's cloud-based, mobile-first, operator-centric, with the most intuitive UI in the industry, making it perfect for today's dynamic pharmaceutical manufacturing environments and for the production of the world's most complex drug products. Whether you're working on groundbreaking cell and gene therapies, biologics, or small molecules, Tempo provides a fully validated MES system that's both powerful and easy to use. It streamlines your processes, ensures compliance, and adapts to your specific manufacturing needs. So get off of paper batch records and discover how Apprentice's Tempo Manufacturing Cloud can transform your operations by visiting us at apprentice.io. Attention industry professionals, revolutionize your manufacturing process with the Apprentice Tempo Manufacturing Cloud, a manufacturing execution system built to streamline your operations, boost efficiency, and ensure compliance all in one powerful platform. Experience the future of manufacturing with our free 30-day trial. Scan the QR code on your screen now to unlock a world of innovation. Don't just keep pace, set the tempo as an industry leader with Apprentice. That's all for Apprentice.io's Industry Insights. I'm Frank Maggiore. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications when new episodes drop. Please comment on if you have any additional topics you would like for me to cover in this space, and we'll see you next week for more Industry Insights.